It's time for Stars on Sports,
a podcast radio show dedicated to sharing stories about our athletic program at Lansing Community College.
LCC Athletics has a strong tradition.
24 national championship wins.
Over 170 All-Americans.
19 MCCAA All-Sports trophies.
Stars on Sports will introduce you to individuals that have contributed to our program's success and give you the backstory on what it takes to develop it.
We'll also dive into and break down the topics and issues facing athletic departments across the nation and right here at LCC.
This is Stars on Sports. Hello and welcome to another episode of Stars on Sports. I'm joined by our Assistant Athletic Director, Stephen Cutter, and our producer, Jeremy Robinson today. And gentlemen, we're recording this as we start a school year, which is always exciting for me, the eve of starting this academic year and on the tail end of the Olympics finishing up. And, you know, when we come into this podcast, it's more than Stars on Sports. It's us Stars on Sports, not specifically LCC sports, but we try and tie that in. And the message that's hit me after the Olympics and all the things going on in sports is kindness. You know, listening to a podcast this morning and talked about, you know, bring love and be excellent and you'll taste success. And I already shared that with you in the office this morning, but I believe that's true. And then, you know, just in sports, I've told you before on this podcast, you know, it's reality TV. It's better than The Bachelor. It's better than Big Brother. You know, it's real. It's, you know, life. And, you know, but the thing that draws me more as I watch sports is the human spirit. You know, how prevalent that is in athletics and how emotional it makes me or how excited it makes me when I see those kind of things. And, you know, I've always approached it differently, but as I get older and reflect of that kindness on the floor and then off the floor. And, you know, we had a great conversation before this podcast started is where does it fit in? And as Coach Cut, you know, I believe, you know, kill people with kindness. I hope I model that. I hope I believe it and live it. But I'm a big believer in it. Like, you know, over my daughter's bed, it says, if you can be anything in the world, be kind. And, you know, that's what I want my family to emulate. But when I coach, I'm not always sure I did that, especially during the heat of competition, you know, and even like helping someone up off the floor or picking up a loose ball. And now looking back, I want that, encourage that among our teams and try and emphasize it among our student athletes. And, you know, we talked about some of the greats before we got on this podcast that were they kind on the floor? Can you be kind on the floor and be successful? Because I truly believe, you know, you need to be competitive. You need to, you know, that competitive nature is, you know, you need that to be successful. And does that contradict kindness, or can they work hand in hand? Or, you know, where'd it go? So, you know, chime in real quickly, your initial thoughts on that.
I think kindness is great off the court. Okay. I think like it's a certain extent to it because you don't want to be disrespectful, like somebody get injured or, you know, you don't want to do something to make somebody get hurt. So, and kindness in regard of playing the right way. Mm-hmm. But so far as competition, it's like me against you. I hear people that are great friends, but when they get on the opposite teams, they share a joy in tackling or dunking on somebody that they love dearly, which is a part of the sport.
For sure. I believe that the two words kindly and competitive do not go together. And I think in general, with kindness in general, not necessarily just in the sports world, but with kindness, you leave yourself open if you're extremely kind to being taken advantage of and to getting run over by others that are on the other side of that spectrum. And so you're going to experience some different stuff. So I believe with everything, there's lines in it. And I also, you know, strongly believe that being kind is very important. Mm-hmm. But when you run into situations, whether it's the competitive situation, or you run into a situation where you have some understandings that this is not going to be a good spot for me to be kind because I've already been taken advantage of, or I've been run over multiple times, then this probably isn't going to be my spot that I'm going to be kind. That doesn't mean I'm going to be ruthless. It just means that I'm probably not going to be extremely kind.
Well, and I think both of you hit it. And crazily, I wasn't sure where I felt on this coming into this. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. But you're right. Kindness is different than being a good sport or being respectful, which you should be at all times, even when you're in the heat of the competition.
You can compete and be respectful.
Yeah,
those
right.
Are
I
two,
agree.
those are two separate things.
Yes, yep.
Right.
I
And
agree.
I think we confuse kindness with those two things, because I'd want you to be kind, but you're right. When someone's real competitive and you're kind, you probably are going to get run over or taken advantage of, and you are competing for probably a score on the scoreboard at that time. And is it easy to turn it on and off when you're on the floor and off the floor? And going back to my coaching experience, that was my motto. Once you step on the floor between these 94-foot lines, you compete. Once you step off the floor, you be nice and you shake hands and be friendly. And thinking what you just said, going back to all my examples of athletes being kind, all of them on my list are not during competition. They're like during the starting lineup. They're like, the only one I know of now is LeBron James. A couple of years ago, a lady that was a concession lady was delivering to courtside seats, and it spilled all over, and he helped her like clean up and like lifted her up while the game was going on.
But he wasn't on the floor.
Yeah, he was. He stopped. I mean, that's the NBA, so yeah.
Just call it
take a play
timeout.
off.
We got a timeout
Right.
right now.
They might have, but the other ones were like examples were like Djokovic playing with a ball boy, but it was during a rain delay, so he was sitting there and letting him the kids sit and got him a water and everything, like reverse roles. Soccer players working with little kids on their walkouts and such, and so many examples of athletes off the field. And I'd like to touch on this a little bit because I know your team is really good at this. But signing autographs after the games, or being part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, that or Big Brother, Big Sister are big things that athletes associate with off the field. So, there is a difference. And I know, like, Casey's Angels, am I saying it right? Your team,
Yes, yeah.
yep, is a big part of that off the field. But again, you've had them come to our event. They've been a part of our team activities, but it's still, throwing the first pitch, but not when the competition takes place.
Yeah. As I said, I think there's just fine lines for everything, and the kindness is a huge piece. I think that in general, we can live in a pretty incredible world if everybody's, pretty kind to each other. And that's a big piece of what makes people happy too, is not only other people being kind to them, but them being kind to other people, because it makes you feel better than the 180 of it and being mean or being rude or anything else. And that's why I was saying, like, when you're competing, you can still you can still be respectful, and you can still do it in such a way that you're gonna compete. And ultimately, I mean, we could go super deep down this tunnel. I mean, in theory, you're supposed to be competing in life, not just on the court. So if you're competing in life, that becomes pretty hard to flip that switch off from the court and then to life, and then how do you be kind?
Right.
And that's what worries me, because we've seen athletes in the past not be able to flip off from the court to life and have off the court issues because of their competitive nature, or even the physicality of the sport. But there is a place for it, and it belongs everywhere in society. But I just wonder if it belongs, within the lines of the baseball or softball field, on the cross country course where they're running down. I don't know. But again, even in the moments during a competition like LeBron, there's times to be kind, like picking up the baseball and giving it to the umpire, or grabbing the opponent's bat and handing it to them. Some are really good at it. Some are, don't have any part of it, of doing some of those things. And I don't think it makes them
which usually goes back to the modeling and the teaching that they've received at some point in their journey is why you see them, do certain things that might not have been from that season, but at some point they saw, caught, were taught, those kind of things and so they're doing it.
But I think most of the time it's not taught because it's frowned upon in sport and
that's
competition.
What I mean. On the other side, it's taught just differently that you don't do that. You don't help somebody else.
Yeah, when I see somebody being kind in sports, I usually worried about that person because usually it's a psychological thing of, I'm going to be real nice to you guys.
Funny. I wouldn't think of it that way. I think it more maybe they're losing.
No, I've done it before. I've done it with people. If you know you're better. If you know you're better than somebody, like I'm about to destroy y'all. I could be like, hey, what's going on? Y'all all right? Hey, what's going on?
But I think that's where you see it most. That's actually what I was going to bring up here is when the competition is as such a variation that it allows you to be, because the one part I have seen it more in sport is in track. When the event is over or the person's so far ahead that they can help the other person, or they go back and help the other person. And you see a lot of neat stories in track of people helping others up. But usually the race is decided. It's not at the finish of a close race. And so interesting point of is it, when that talent discrepancy is greater and it allows you to be nice. But we both know that's also when upsets might happen.
Right.
No, I mean nice in the fact that I'm gonna be nice to you, so you drop your guard, and I'm gonna get these 10 points on you. I got that side of it too. Yep. Yeah.
Which also feeds into a question that I use quite a bit, and will ask people, and I believe it to be a really good question. But it's what's your intention?
Right. So the intention.
And they're not necessarily bringing up something they want, but it's a different situation. What's your intention here? What do you and same thing when somebody's being overly nice. It's kind of like you're thinking to yourself in your head, what's their intention here?
Yeah, that's a great point. And if it's not if it's an artificial intention, then that defeats the purpose of even being kind or real to begin with. But the intention is really to be that kind of person. I admire that trait. So, but in the middle of competition, it's hard to, stop and think of what their intention is. And that's why most competitors are on guard and don't even want to deal with it. They're not, they're focused on the ultimate goal of, competing. And I want our student athletes to represent LCC well. That's one of my main things that I tell them on and off the field. And, a saying that we've talked about a lot in our office lately is how you do anything is how you do everything, which will be a whole nother podcast. But I truly believe that that's, being kind, or again, I just don't want to confuse, and I think I am a little bit, kindness with sportsmanship, because they are different. And, I'm still trying to think of that a great example of kindness in sport that can take place. But what about people on the bench that aren't participating actively and such? They still got to be focused and ready to go and but they have roles.
They're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But I think in general, if you see competitive teams, the entire team's competitive.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what their role is.
I would agree, especially successful team. They're just like anything. The more that are of that trait, the better they will be at that trait. And again, it's modeled and rolled and important. But can competitiveness be taken too far and lead to? But then it leads to more unsportsmanship than probably unkind.
You get a lot of different things. There's another big word that comes up, and it's class.
Great
and
one.
It's being competitive. Maybe the football team has a running clock after halftime and wins by 50, and that's not supposedly. It's pretty hard to win big and have class because the scoreboard says something different.
Right.
But if you're teaching kids how to compete to the final whistle or to the
final
play or whatever. There's some weird stuff that happens in there, and then weird expectations of what the competitors are supposed to do, based on the scoreboard. When we teach, don't play to the scoreboard, play to standards. And so if you do that and you're playing to standards, and you're playing to the final whistle or whatever it might be, then the scoreboard doesn't matter. But the outside world wants you to pay attention to the scoreboard, which is not a good thing to do when you're competing.
I think that's a great point in the sense of what is class, and can you confuse that with kindness? Because one of the issues I've had with coaches in the past is who's supposed to throw the white flag first? Is it the team down a lot, or is it the team up a lot? And I would have different coaches argue, once they show me that they're giving up and my score is good enough to beat them, I will put in my backup. But I had some coaches say, no, I'm putting my backups in. The score might come up, and it's class. And to your point then is, once you put in your backup players, do you just take a knee in football, or, throw balls, or do you, let the backups play? Like do you down it at the end of the game or try and score? And I think those are arguments, and people get confused with class and sportsmanship and even kindness of the opposing coach.
We had a situation in my tenure here that we were up big on a team, and pretty much our protocol when we get up by a certain number on a team is when we have one of the more prolific offenses in the country, so we'll score a lot of runs. And when that happens, somebody hits a double in the gap, it's a single, so we're going one base at a time. And unless it's a home run, we jog around, but anything else is basically a single. Pass ball goes the backstop, runner on first, we stay at first. And we actually had a situation where we got called classless for doing that by taking the foot off the gas.
Yeah.
So you can't win regardless.
So you don't.
No, that's
you
where you got to stay true to your standard. Our softball team had a similar situation where they played a team that was in a totally different competitive environment, they would have to find ways to get out of innings, and I thought they did it very classy, and I think the other opposing coach did, but instead of running the score up or keeping it endlessly going, because there are no mercy rules. Well, there are at certain innings, but if you don't get to those innings, then it makes it very long and difficult. So yes, I think that's another argument we have in our environment department.
There's expectations on you to be kind when you're competing, and then the scoreboard says that you're not kind, and then if you go on the other side and you stop competing, then it looks like you're also not kind,
right?
Like you're being cocky.
You're not competing.
Yeah. And I've seen coaches both ways get in trouble. One for running up the score, and one's for not handling it. And that just goes back to the another interesting thing that come up is the most obvious things are sometimes the most difficult things, and people think that's the easiest situation to coach in is when the score is out of hand, but we both know it's not true, because you try, again, it's your standard and how you handle, or how the other thing we deal with is it's not just us, we're dealing with an opponent we might not know well, and how do they handle, or how do their student athletes respond? And that's our men's basketball coach always, in a close game, calls timeout at the end of the game to remind them, hey, we're going to shake hands with class and we're going to be good sports, because he knows those can be difficult moments at the end. And this is a whole nother podcast, but at one time in my life, I was against shaking hands after the game, but I didn't think people did. Back to your intention, I didn't think people did it, and like we think we're all good sports because we force people to shake hands at the end of the game, when most they don't. They go shake hands. If you don't do it, they usually go shake hands with the people they want to talk to or touch to. And Tom Izzo was a big proponent. You better, at the end of the game's over, you got to learn and you got to go shake people's hands. And I agree with them. And I think, like in hockey, they do it at the end of the series, which is some of the neatest sportsmanship. But for most of the time, some kids haven't let go of the game yet, and two, it's not intentional. They're not doing it.
I think it's an old school thought process with shaking hands, and you think about the mentalities with societal impacts on it with shaking hands, and how to shake hands, and the impact that you can have by shaking somebody's hand.
Yep.
So it's one of those things. But if you watch a handshake line, nobody's shaking hands.
Right.
It's knuckles or other things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of missed at this point, and you have to be really careful in those lines, because that game just ended. There's things that can happen. Usually it's what's said, and something is said, and then something can happen after that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a large diminishing return for that, because
Agreed.
the players that do want to show respect to each other, you will see after games, win or loss,
Yeah.
you'll see players talking to each other that they want to talk to. And I think the handshake lines are absolute eyewash.
Yeah. I
Well-
agree. Go ahead.
Well,
All
so
right. This is good.
I don't think so, because I had a real good situation, close game. My best player had the ball. Refs was not that good. It was like teenagers. And they wasn't calling good fouls like that. The other coach knew that. So my player had the ball. I knew he was about to get a bucket. He had his player intentionally foul my kid. Parents went wild. And game ended, running clock. The kids is hurt. I could see the kid like, so I had to like stand up, get in line. So they had to learn, to me, in life, no matter how bad somebody like treats you, you got to learn how to forgive and move on, because if not, it's going to affect how you conduct yourself. So I had to suck it up myself too. I was furious, but I got in that line. I shook his hand, had a conversation on the side after that, and he apologized to me. But I'm like, you teaching your kids a bad lesson to fight dirty in order to win.
And I agree with you, Journey. And I think that Tom Izzo's stance too, that the game is over, put it behind you and shake their hand. I think where Coach Cutter's coming from is we're not teaching kids that. You showed your team how to do that. Most kids, we just line them up and they walk through and don't say good game or do anything. So
That's not happening. In baseball, the coaches typically, after the games are over, always meet.
Okay.
Almost always meet behind home plate and shake hands.
So it's more like a modeling thing. Y'all modeling that.
And like you said, then the kids that know each other do it.
It's super.
And we've got called out on it in baseball
super
before.
transactional with the players.
Gotcha.
And the ones that want to connect will connect. And I think you just run into too many things that are being said.
And I agree. And I think if we could get to the point where if we could make it a meaningful exchange at the end, it would be good to have handshakes. And that's what I think where the hockey series does, because the series is over. They played 4 or 7 games. They're legitimately want to say good game. But in too many times, I don't think that
are they doing that after game 1?
No, that's the neat thing about hockey. They do it at the end of the series, and they don't do it during the regular season. So my point is, if we could teach them the intent of that message and why we do it, and I know that's what Tom Izzo wants to, but in the end, it's happened so quickly that I'm not sure the benefit reaches itself, because I'm not sure the intent there is the lesson of, hey, you just played hard, go respect that opponent. Most are just walking through the line and just want to get out of there.
Got you.
But I agree. If we could teach them at the end of the game that life lesson, and you didn't do enough or you did do enough, now go shake it would be meaningful. I just don't think that happens enough. And I think the actual opposite happens of too many other things happen, that people aren't in that spot. You were there, you were aware, you handled the situation, but too many don't. We see that's where, incidents happen and leads to much bigger issues.
It's all about the makeup
line.
of your team too. Because like what you were saying about taking the gas off, like if I was a player and you took the gas off of me, that's disrespectful. Because I'm like, yo, that means you saying I'm less than, so I don't want that. But some people, they get mad when you're over, like you dropping a lot of points on them like
when
that.
You're up by 30,
yeah,
and you're up by 40.
But I think that that's the makeup of your team.
But that's the problem is
even coaches.
But even in your instance you just shared about basketball, it could be just one kid that had a bad game that's frustrated that you might not be aware of. You usually can tell in between, games, and even our basketball coach, it's usually close games. He called it just to remind them, but you could even have that in the blowouts. But your coaches know your team, but do you know the other team? And are you aware of who's mad? And most of the time you do. And even some sports, they shake the hand of the official, which I think is crazy. I'd like to get the official out of there. I
think a thank you is super beneficial for the officials.
Yeah.
And those thank yous don't always have to be at the end of the game.
They
can be at the beginning, the middle, different areas where there's breaks, but the thank yous go a lot farther. And once again, you put yourself in uncharted territory when you've got players shaking officials' hands, because you don't know what everybody's intention is.
Right.
If everybody's intention is to be kind and that's the world we're living in. That's perfect. That's incredible. And that's going to help the officials kind of put past the Jim Joyce kind of stuff with Galarraga. Perfect game for the Tigers.
When you say
put that you can kind of put that stuff behind just a little bit, but not everybody's intentions are the same.
Yeah.
And I've shared this before on a podcast. Competition brings out the best in product, the worst in people. And you're right. Through a heavily competed environment, you don't know what the intent is. I've even at the beginning of games now, you watch some basketball team go shake the opponents of other coaches, and some coaches put their assistant out there. Some don't put anyone out there, so they end up shaking the hand of the officials. And so you're right. I'm just not sure the consistency or the right message is there. I have seen at my previous job, our coach taught kids how to shake hands, and you could tell. And I enjoyed your baseball team does it, and our wrestling team at Mason did it, and they shook it professionally and meaningfully, which went a lot farther when you were shaking it. But it's back to the modeling and the leadership of knowing who your team is, the manage these situations. But in the end, I'm hoping you're right. It's about class. It's about sportsmanship. It's about being competitive within those frameworks. And in the end, kindness, I think, carries over onto the field, but more importantly, off the field in the world.
Yeah. So I think it goes to the home. Yeah. Because when you under pressure, who you really are will show.
Yep.
When you squeeze
in.
Not only who you are, but how you've prepared.
Yep.
No, good one.
That's good.
Another prime pass. So, okay. So those people that are still listening at the end of our podcast, as we wrap up summer, what's your favorite spot? A couple years ago, I went on vacation down south and sent a picture to one of my kids of a beautiful sunset, and they replied back with a beautiful sunset in the state of Michigan. And I'm thinking, why am I going south when there's so many great places in this state? So our family started exploring different areas, and so, open up this summer, a lot of people come to Michigan in the summer, or hopefully you've been able to explore some areas that you have, and it can be locally. I mean, there's some, I forget the crazy stat of how close we are to a lake in Michigan, like under 10 miles, I think. So do you guys have a favorite spot in the state that you like to visit?
Okay. Favorite spot in the state. This year has been, I just bought a house, so traveling and doing a lot of things is on the low end. So my favorite spot right now has been the bike trail in Lansing. Okay,
good one. And they're really building that up and trying to make it more user-friendly. Yeah. But do you have a spot maybe growing up that you'd like to go to or go visit?
Downtown Detroit. Just was always a good thing, like good memories of my mom. Okay. So I just like going out there, seeing my city, spending time. Remember going to.
And they've worked hard at building that up too. So
my first baseball game, watching out there, Tigers.
Yeah,
so
I remember my first Tiger game.
Yeah,
love it.
The random homeless guy trying to sell me a flag, like just good memories.
Yeah, that is all part of the environment.
Yep.
What about you, Coach?
Well, I'm originally from the West Michigan area, and in the West Michigan area, we have Lake Michigan, we have the beaches, and it's certainly an area that it's full of tourism. And so certainly I have some favorite spots, and whether it was in the Whitehall area, Muskegon, Pentwater, Silver Lake, those areas. But definitely getting a pizza from some of the great pizza places around there, and going to the beach and having dinner with the family and stuff. I mean, it's hard to beat. Really hard to beat.
And that's the best thing about this state, because I've had good experience going to the east side of Detroit, or I went to Port Huron as part of our league now with SC4, and the bridge to Canada, and where Lake St. Clair and Lake Huron meet. And then going to the west side, my family lives in Grand Haven. That's a great area. But even going farther north, I hope one of my kids hasn't been on the Mackinac Bridge yet, but I think that should be important for everybody in Michigan. I haven't gone. I've been to UP a couple of times, but people just love going up there. But I hope that sometime you get to experience that, because this state has it.
Mackinac Island.
Right.
Yeah,
my favorite area would probably be the Glen Arbor area. I went to Sleeping Bear Dunes a couple years ago, and I just loved that.
Be careful there.
Right. I hear you. We've talked about that story, but. Anyway, good stuff. We deviated from food. You tried to bring pizza back into it because I had a snack question, but we'll do that next time. So until next time, be kind and go Stars.
Compete.
Stars on Sports is recorded live at the WLNZ studios. Engineering and production assistance are provided by Dedalian Lowry and Jeremy Robinson. You can listen to this episode and other episodes of Stars on Sports on demand at lccconnect.org. To find more information about our athletic program, visit lccstars.com. Thanks for listening. Go Stars!